Well, here we are back for another Steelers Now pregame scout. Do we have to get back out there so soon? Or maybe it's a good thing after what we saw Sunday at Acrisure Stadium. It's the Steelers' second and final Thursday night game on Amazon Prime. Al Michaels, I'm sure, will be barely above comatose for this broadcast of Steelers and Patriots. Steelers and Patriots, kids, it used to be a fun thing. We used to get really fired up for these games. It's still an important game for the Steelers, and I know I called the Cardinals a sad sack franchise. The Patriots, it's amazing how far they've fallen off, but wow, it is important, but it is not one that's easy to really get revved up for in terms of the strength of the two teams. I'm Matt Gajtka. Steelers Now analyst Derrick Bell, of course, is alongside again. This last week, Derrick, wow, we were talking about maybe the Steelers getting into the high 20s points wise. It took them all the way deep into the fourth quarter to even get to double digits against the 2-win Cardinals team. They lose. It was a miserable day for those who attended, I'm sure, at Acrisure Stadium. It was miserable to watch on TV. Was that the worst game of the Tomlin era? Is that hyperbole to say that it might have been?
Man, I don't know about the worst game of the Tomlin era, just because I think back to some of the, I guess, Steelers teams that we thought were, I guess, more talented and better, had higher expectations for, that dropped similar type games in these situations over the years. But man, it was really tough to watch. I mean, you talked about just from a fan experience or from anyone that's participating in that game, multiple weather delays, just kind of prolong. It just felt like it was prolonging the inevitable, especially after the first weather delay. It was like, man, can we just go home? Can we? I was so ready to just write my post game article and just get this over with, just based on what we were seeing out there on the field. But yeah, I mean, clearly, you and I were anticipating a completely different performance from the Steelers last week. I thought that they were going to be able to continue a little bit of their momentum offensively, and unfortunately, that just did not happen, and we got pretty much the exact opposite.
Didn't happen, and we also had a fresh batch of injuries for the Steelers to deal with.
Huge storyline
Among
there.
them, Kenny Pickett. So it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. But you know what? They're still in playoff position. 7-5 is the record right now. That's a playoff spot. Actually, they're tied with three other teams in the AFC. They have the tiebreak edge over the Colts, the Browns, and the Texans. So the season isn't over. Still a handful of games to go. 5, in fact, even though that felt like a significant step back. Let's go to first down here, Derrick. Which side of the ball was worse? Because for me, I know we were expecting more from the offense, but also to see the Cardinals march down the field 99 yards after the goal line stand, it was a lot to take, and it was quite unexpected on my part. So if you had to break it down from a scheme perspective, from an execution perspective, which side of the ball disappointed you the most?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, I was anticipating more of I guess, just kind of momentum from the offense. We just didn't get that. But to your point, the defense didn't really help us out in that regard either. So I do think, excuse me.
We're still getting over the cold here. Well, for him, it's COVID. For me, it's a cold. We're a little better this week, though.
Yeah. No, but I do think the 4th and 1 stop, everything just kind of came crashing down. They had just the massive turning point. Pickett gets injured, the 4th and 1 stop where they generated no push up front, and then the 99-yard touchdown drive. I do want to give credit to the Cardinals just because I do think that they were very well prepared for what they were going to see with the Steelers. I think you can always tell a little bit about how well coached a team is or their general game plan feel coming into the game, just based on what you see early. And they attacked the Steelers' spine of the defense, like over the middle of the field. They really went after the Steelers linebackers in coverage, particularly Mykal Walker. And then they got the ball to their best playmaker in Trey McBride. He was somebody that we talked about a little bit last week. And, they made him pay. I thought Kyler made just enough plays. And over the course of the game, I just thought they really wore the Steelers out defensively.
Okay. Yeah, the linebacking, I suppose, attrition rate continues on here. We saw, for instance, you chronicled this quite well, in fact, on SteelersNow.com in your SN Plus film breakdown this week, that linebacker Michael Walker ended up being a pivotal player for the Steelers. And that probably isn't the thing that we thought we would hear this year. And he wasn't pivotal in a good way. So are we just talking about the need for, on the defensive side, especially in the middle of the field, for guys to just play over their heads, or else we're going to see more of the same this week?
Yeah, it's really tough because you can definitely acknowledge that they came up short, and some of the things that Arizona was doing to exploit them was very noticeable. Not just live, but especially when you go back and watch the tape. But there's also some context necessary, right? Like if you're down to your fourth, fifth, sixth inside linebackers, it's very hard for any team, regardless of your depth, to withstand that type of thing. I mean, and I think that Walker, who had played pretty well over the first couple times that we got exposure to him, the Cardinals went after him. And I think that is credit to good coaching, because you see, you start looking at the potential weak links of the defense. All right, we got some backups in. Let's test them early. And that's really what Arizona did. They tested him early, and then they realized that they, had the matchup they liked just based on the way that the Steelers were playing schematically. And then basically every time that, they were able to get him in a high-low, or every time they were able to get him in man coverage on McBride, they took advantage over the middle of the field. And, having a tight end like that who is athletic, he's strong, good at the catch point, good after the catch. It's a very difficult thing. There's not a lot of linebackers, I feel like, that are going to have the advantage against McBride in coverage, especially as time moves on and he continues to get better. But there was some frustrating stuff with the Steelers too, because just over the course of the game, it just didn't feel like they adjusted, and they kept giving the Cardinals that matchup. And it was like, man, like at some point you've got to put somebody else on him. Like you got to put Fitzpatrick on him. You've got to do some different things to try to give him some help, to try to alleviate that stress. And unfortunately, that just never came. And then once it got into like the late third quarter, fourth quarter, it was just all run game. And they just started really imposing their will on the Steelers front after Landon Roberts went down.
And on the offensive side, was there an aspect of the game, an aspect that you felt really short-circuited what they were trying to do when it came to piling up yards and scoring points? You did have George Pickens as one of your dudes in your post-game review, and also the run game in the first half, even though it didn't produce very many points. And, of course, they were stopped on 4th down and goal in that second quarter. Might have turned the game in that spot. But you also had, for instance, rookie tackle Broderick Jones as one of your duds from that one, and including an early down in which Pickett was rushed, and that was basically Jones getting beat. So what can you pinpoint there that fell off from the week before at Cincinnati?
Yeah, I just felt like at the beginning of the game, like you go back and watch those first, I would say probably 7 or 8 rushes from Harris and Warren. You saw just a crazy amount of push up front from the Steelers offensive line. They were creating holes. They were doing a good job getting out on the move, different run concepts. They had, I want to say that Harris's first like 3 carries of the game went for like over 20 yards. I mean, it felt like that was going to be a game where, we talked about the Cardinals run defense, and defense in general had struggled over the course of the season. But just as the game wore on, just game script and some different things, I thought Arizona kind of tightened up a little bit at the line of scrimmage. Their secondary did a good job tackling when they needed to as well. And then just the passing game continues to be completely disjointed. They were Pickett was able to get that schemed up deep shot to George Pickens off the flood concept early in the game, but this passing game just still feels so limited to me. It just always consistently feels out of sync, and I think that is notable in like just how the quarterback feels and looks, and that wasn't necessarily just strictly Pickett, but also Trubisky, who we're going to see tomorrow night, against the Patriots.
Okay, let's move on to Kenny Pickett. I don't think it's the last we're going to see of Kenny Pickett this season. He's going to miss 2 to 4 weeks, seems to be the consensus there, at least a couple of games, including this one Thursday night against the Pats. It's going to be Mitch Trubisky. We'll talk about him and his benefits and drawbacks in just a little bit. But it feels like a pretty good time, Derrick, to zoom out and take a look at the Kenny Pickett experience here in season 2. Again, injuries have come to the surface a couple of times. Not saying it's all his fault, but that's now 4 times he's had to leave a game early due to injury, and not even 2 full seasons as a National Football League starting quarterback. So certainly that's a ding to his record, rightly or wrongly. It just is. Availability is the best ability, as they say, and I believe that to be true. But just in terms of performance here, can you give him any higher than, say, a D for what he did this season? And how much has he been downgraded in your eyes when you look at his future potential compared to where we were at coming off of a pretty spectacular preseason?
Yeah. I think with with the availability thing, I don't think, and I think people are misconstruing this a little bit maybe on social media. It's definitely not a toughness thing with Pickett, right? Like there are players can get injured for a myriad of different reasons. Some fluky, some not. But I just think with him, once you get into these consistent scenarios where the quarterback isn't able to finish the game, I think it's definitely troublesome. Not just for him, like taking care of his body, but also they've gotten him hit a couple times that, probably could have been avoided. He probably could have avoided some of these hits. And then, like I said, some of this just luck more than anything else. But really, the word that I keep coming back to with his sophomore season is just kind of waste. Like I just feel like it was wasted. I'm of the opinion that Pickett at his very best was probably going to be a win with type of starter. If you got the absolute best out of him, put him in the right ecosystem. But I don't think that the Steelers necessarily did that because of the decision to bring back Matt Canada. And having said that, I don't think he's played particularly well either. Like you see some regression with him just in terms of even some of the things that he didn't struggle with as a rookie, particularly like accuracy, things of that nature. And I still think that, he has a long way to go before we kind of can for sure say that he's like a long-term starter in the league. Everything makes it, this injury in particular makes it really difficult, right? Because the Steelers are competitive. They have a roster that is competitive. It might not be necessarily good or as good as people were hoping, but they're in a weird situation now because his first two seasons haven't gone according to plan, and the defense is getting a little bit older, and they're pretty much ready to win right now. And with Pickett losing these next 2 to 4 weeks, we may only get to see him for another game or two. And then the Steelers are going to have to make a decision in the offseason on how they're going to construct the quarterback room. And I think that that's particularly disappointing because you want as big of a sample size as you can get to evaluate him at this offense, what he can be. And unfortunately, we're going to get robbed of that a little bit over the next couple of weeks.
That's always the struggle in the NFL. Small sample size. They only play 17 games. Used to be 16, of course, but that's not a lot in the context of major professional sports. In the NHL and NBA, you get 82. In MLB, you get 162. Starting pitchers left out of that conversation. But you know what I mean. There are very
Yeah.
limited looks here. And the way that the cap is structured and the CBA is structured, you have to make these calls or else you lose the player and you have to move on. Is there a part of his game that you thought was especially a weak spot this year? One that you thought would be better in his second year? Again, I don't want to say like the second year is over, but it almost feels like it is for all intents and purposes. What didn't progress, in other words, that you thought would?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the big thing for me is was just the accuracy portion of it. I just felt like there were a couple too many instances where I just felt like just accuracy woes were popping up. So specifically in the underneath parts of the field, the intermediate parts of the field. And then just, overall just his lack of confidence, I feel like, in himself. That was something that I feel like as his rookie season kind of went on and progressed, I felt like that I never really had to worry about, if he was confident just in his own abilities. And I just feel like this season, he just didn't look like himself in terms of believing that he was, the right guy almost. It almost looked like on tape he was kind of gun shy and just really, like lacking energy a little
Mhm.
bit. So I think that those things, because I wasn't really worried about his confidence. I wasn't really worried about his accuracy. There were obviously a lot of stuff that you wanted to see him improve on coming off his rookie season, but that's really, I mean, he's a rookie quarterback. Like you expect that stuff. But just the fact that, not only did he not really improve on some of the other things we were looking for, he kind of regressed in those other areas that weren't necessarily problems. And I think that that's, it's worrisome. And, that's why the Steelers had to let go of Matt Canada. When the quarterback doesn't develop, offensive coaches typically lose their jobs. And like I said, the decision that the Steelers are going to have to make in the offseason about, how they're going to construct this offense next year, who the guy is or what kind of environment that they're going to need to put him in order to get the best out of him. Those are questions that are going to have to be like at the very top of the priority list.
And they'll have to make those calls with not that much data to look at, too. That's the real shame of this injury, in addition to
Yeah.
from a competitive standpoint. So we'll dovetail right into third down as we look ahead to Steelers and Pats Thursday night, Acrisure Stadium. like I said, used to be a real primetime matchup. Now this one is primetime technically because it's at night, but that's about all they have going for them. Hey, the end zones are going to be painted gold. So for those of us who remember Three Rivers Stadium, boy, that does get the goosebumps rising on the arm a little bit. So I do enjoy that. It'll be I think a color rush game too. So if you're into that sort of thing, that'll help dress it up a little bit.
Yep.
But otherwise, quarterback matchup, yeah, we've got Mitch Trubisky on one side and we've got Bailey Zappi apparently on the other. The Pats haven't officially confirmed it, but it just looks like Mac Jones isn't working out in New England. There is a third quarterback, more mobile guy, but I don't know if they're going to go to him at this moment. It seems like it's going to be Bailey Zappi out of Western Kentucky. And if you've watched the Patriots, you know they have not put up much of anything on offense this year. And Mitch Trubisky, limited action this season, came in late against the Jags when Kenny Pickett was hurt. Actually got most of the second half, I believe, in that one. And threw a late interception. That's the one play that stands out. But he'll push the ball down the field, won't he? Or at least he'll try to, compared to what we saw more from Pickett this year. So is that the big difference for you between the two of them? Trubisky's just more of a high risk, high reward type guy.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, man, is just understanding that Trubisky is who he is. I even remember kind of just going back and watching some film on Mitch when they signed him last year to kind of be the bridge guy. Just going back and watching, and, it's very obvious that Mitch is confident in his own abilities, like his athleticism, his arm, things like that. But it's borderline irrational confidence. There's some questionable decision making. He is very much one of those guys that thinks that he can make every throw, regardless of platform, regardless of coverage, anything like that. So I do think that you're going to see more of a um, roller coaster, more of a range of outcomes, just in terms of not just game to game with him over the next, potentially month, but also like just snap to snap, series to series. Because Mitch will make some throws that make him look like a pretty competent starter in this league. And then, he'll go quarters where you're like, what in the world are you looking at? Like, I don't understand what you're doing. So I do think that, just the difference between him and Pickett is probably, you're going to get a quarterback with a little bit stronger of an arm, a little bit more functional. I feel like as a runner, Mitch is a guy who likes to use his legs. He likes to play make. He likes to move around, scramble. Not that Pickett doesn't kind of play in a similar vein, but Mitch kind of almost leans into it a little bit more. But also I feel like, he is a worse decision maker, just in terms of not taking care of the football, putting the ball in harm's way. So I'm interested to see, going up against Bill Belichick, one of, if not the greatest, defensive mind in the history of football, kind of what the Patriots game plan looks like, especially because they were able to see Mitch just last year. I mean, it's only been, 14 months or so since they last saw him in this offense.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the Pats defense, they've been doing all they can do, honestly. They have given up 10 points or fewer in 3 consecutive games, and they have lost all three. The first team since the 1938 Chicago Cardinals. That tells you just the name of the franchise, the last team to do that. And not something you want to be lumped in with when you're talking about getting wins and losses. But I think it's easy to look at the Pats and say, okay, 2-10, same record as the Cardinals, by the way, last week when they came in, and say just a bad team all around. But really, it's more just a bad offense, isn't it, for the Pats?
Yeah, the offense has been a catastrophe would be the best word to describe the Patriots offense really over the past 2 seasons. And, I felt like, speaking of quarterbacks that just haven't really necessarily developed the way that they anticipated, the Pats, they get that really strong season out of Mac Jones. He looked like a very competent starter. And then, they put him with Matt Patricia in his sophomore season. He loses confidence and, his development's really spiraled downhill. Even in bringing in a guy like Bill O'Brien, who's had success at different levels over the course of his career, he just hasn't been able to get Mac back on track. And I think that really Mac's downward spiral has led them to Bailey Zappi. Kind of one of the differences between Zappi and Jones. I feel like Jones has completely lost confidence in himself. Like you can see it just the way that he plays. He just does not have any confidence in like what he's seeing through his progressions. He doesn't have confidence in his arm anymore. The Patriots are limited in terms of on offense with their skill position players. But I think one thing that I've noticed about Zappi is he's been a little bit better in terms of navigating some of the pressure up front, and he leans into like doing a little bit more running around, scrambling, making plays, extending with his legs, because that's not really Jones's strong point. Um, He'll push the ball down the field as well. Like you watched him against the Chargers last week, particularly in the second half. The dude he will throw the go ball. Like, not that the Patriots really necessarily have like an elite deep threat, but he was looking for Parker down the sideline, things like that. So Zappy's going to push the ball. I anticipate we're going to see a similar game plan to what we saw last year when these two teams matched up. I think the Pats are going to lean into a lot of like deep crossers to try to beat man coverage that they're going to anticipate from the Steelers defense. But it'll be, interesting to see if Zappy's able to hit those throws.
What do you make of the short preparation window for this? Like you said, Bill Belichick, for all that's gone wrong, it's still Bill Belichick. And I guess if there's less time to prep, I don't know if I feel better or worse about facing Bill because, he's good at it. He's good at getting his players to nail down certain details and make you play with one hand tied behind your back. That's always been his signature thing. His teams have been kind of like a chameleon. Whatever he needs them to be, they're able to adjust and mold. Do you see that as being a detriment to that type of preparation, just playing on Thursday night as opposed to Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, you look back just in terms of his career. And like you said, the thing that he's really been notable for is like being able to kind of morph his defense into whatever he needs, not just that season, but based on his personnel, based on the matchup. And you still see some of that. They've done a good job in terms of making the best on what they've got on defense. I mean, you got to think like this is a top 10 defense this year,
Mhm.
pretty easily, especially when you factor in the lack of offensive production that they've got. But it's a top 10 defense that lost its best cornerback early in the season. They also lost their best pass rusher in Matthew Judon. So they're missing arguably like two of their better players. And they've got some other really good pieces over there. Kyle Duggar, I think, is one of the best, like most underrated players in the league. They've got some guys that are now getting healthy. Christian Barmore's playing a really good ball. Their inside linebackers are really physical. They defend the run at a really high level. They're like they've only allowed, I think, opposing offenses 100 rushing yards once since week 5. I mean, they held Austin Eckler, and I know Eckler hasn't looked like himself this year, but they held Austin Eckler like 20 something yards last week. His longest carry was 4. So they are going to put up a fight in terms of what they're able to bring on defense. And these two teams are familiar with each other. Like you mentioned, the Brady Roethlisberger era, like these guys, Tomlin, Belichick, Steelers, Pats, like they were playing each other every single year. So, kind of the attitude, the mentality, the game plan and tendencies from both of these teams, even as the names on the back of the jerseys kind of have changed.
What about individual matchups? Have you been able to dig into anything? And what are you seeing there that might give the Steelers an edge here? They're playing at home, obviously, but that was not that big of a help last week.
Yeah. Yeah, I think short week always makes it tough on me just in terms of, trying to get through the film, things like that. One of the things too that I've kind of noticed just on the outside, like if you're going to move the ball against the Pats, you're going to have to throw the football just because of how stout they are up front on the defensive line. They got a lot of big bodies, guys that are capable of just holding their ground at the line of scrimmage, physical linebackers that like to play downhill. Their safeties are excellent near the line as well. So you're going to have to move the ball down the field, take some chances outside. If there is a place where you can do that, it's against these cornerbacks. Jonathan Jones is a solid player, but one of the things that he's kind of always struggled with is, bigger bodied receivers can give him some trouble. He's not the biggest guy. And then even JC Jackson, he's had some injuries over the past couple of years. He went to the Chargers, came back, but he's given up a lot of big plays over the past couple of seasons as well. So in order for the Steelers to win this game, they're going to probably need to hit 2-3 explosive plays at the very least down the sideline, maybe on some go balls. Maybe you get some schemed up stuff to take advantage of George Pickens' size and athleticism. And we'll see kind of how that goes. And like I mentioned with Christian Gonzalez, their best corner that got hurt early in the season, a rookie. The reason that I feel like they went and got him was because he's a bigger corner. So like they've got nice pieces in the back end, but they were missing that bigger corner to match up against some of these like bigger, more physically gifted receivers like Pickens. So I think that's a matchup that, they could potentially exploit.
Still, the trends and the circumstances point to another low-scoring game for the Steelers' offense. They've been at 17 points or lower the last 3. I told you about how the Pats' defense has limited opponents so far. Any reason to go against that? Are you feeling like the Steelers can exploit this, or is it just too much of an unknown with Trubisky in there? Not that Kenny Pickett was being consistent by any means, but it still feels like a wild card scenario, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing too is, like I said, we have granted, some of the players have changed, but like we have a baseline we can look at from last season on how this matchup kind of unfolded. And Trubisky didn't play particularly well. They left some opportunities on the field. It was one of those games where it really felt like, mistakes were really key. You think about Gunner, he fumbled that punt that led to a cheap scoring drive for the Patriots offense. One of the ways that the Patriots kind of got after the Steelers last season was they played some drop eight coverages. They made Pickett. They made Trubisky play from the pocket and play like an actual quarterback instead of kind of his chaotic tendencies in the backfield. So they had some success with that. But I'll just continue to go back. Like, this is going to be a game that's going to come down to turnovers, because I don't believe that either of these offenses, just as currently constructed, can move the ball at will on the other's defense. So this is going to come back to which backup quarterback makes the least mistakes, and generally like the most cliche kind of term or tendency for like this type of game is like the backup quarterback's probably going to have to take care of the football.
Last year, Mitch Trubisky in this matchup, it was in mid-September, second game of the year. Patriots win it at Acrisure 17-14. Trubisky threw for only 168 on 21 completions. So it was a lot of dink and dunk stuff. It was a lot of stuff not very far down the field. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. If there is one good thing to say about what Kenny Pickett did this year, too, it's that he didn't turn the ball over. The Steelers just don't turn the ball over in general. So that's the one area where I'm feeling a little queasy, is that Trubisky's the type of guy that, yeah, he might throw another big completion down the field, a few of them, in fact, but he also might throw it up for grabs. And we have seen that too in his career, but he has more of a track record at the NFL level than Pickett does. So I guess if you go long term, like the last several years, I'm not sure it's really a downgrade at all. It's just a different type of quarterback there. So there you go. The over-under is 30. That is it. And I have a hard time picking the over here. So what are your feelings on result? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to for Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, for first and foremost, I want the under. Like that is very obvious to me. I want to say that I've seen some tweets going around that like this is like the lowest over under in X amount of years. I mean, it's been a while since you've seen an NFL game with this type of under. But I'm going to give the Steelers the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to make any wild, outlandish predictions about what's going to happen, because I did that last week and showed confidence in the offense, and it came back to bite me in the behind. So I'm going to say that the Steelers win a extremely ugly game, like something like 16-13 or something like that. And that's really based on the fact that I think that they will be able to turn Zappy over at least like once or twice. I think TJ Watt, those guys, the pass rush is going to have a good game and make him really uncomfortable. One thing that is nice from the Steelers defensive perspective, playing a lot of man coverage, the Pats are limited in terms of playmakers. Even some of their playmakers that they've looked to get more playing time, like Pop Douglas, it looks like he's probably going to miss this game. And then Ramondre Stevenson, their top running back, is also probably going to miss this game as well. So the Patriots are not just – they're lacking a little bit of talent, but they're also not very healthy. So I think that the Steelers will be able to do what they need to do in the back end and create enough chaos. And I think that you'll probably get one drive where Mitch looks like he's really good, probably when they go up tempo in like a 2-minute situation. And that'll be just enough to win a really ugly game. And then we'll probably be on here next week talking about how this doesn't really feel like a good win, but they won nonetheless and kept their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah. Well, really, even if they lose, they're still likely to be in a playoff spot, but you don't want to start taking that to chance.
Yeah. It starts getting a little dicey.
Yeah, looking at the 3 teams they're tied with, let me just lay this out for you. 5, 6, and 7, and 8 in the AFC all have 7-5 records. That's the Steelers, the Colts, the Browns, and the Texans. The Steelers out of that group have the, quote, easiest matchup this week, if we still want to play that game. The Texans have the second easiest. They're playing the Jets. Browns are against the Jags, and the Colts are against the Bengals. So those two.
A lot of backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Linebacker
So
quarterbacks.
I talked war of attrition earlier. It's really happening across the league. Hey, it's a brutal game, and it's a 4-month season. So that's what's gonna pop up here. So 5 games to go, and right, anything could happen still at this point. All right, Derek. Thank you again, and thank you, pardon me, to everyone else for watching and joining us. It's been fun. A short week here, and then back with the Colts the following week. So yeah, the stakes are going to continue to rise. Thanks for watching the Steelers Now pregame scout.